The aroma of rosemary and garlic filled my cozy kitchen as I stirred the simmering sauce, the clinking of wine glasses and laughter spilling from the dining room. I could hear Mark's voice rising above the others, animated as always, recounting a funny story from his childhood. I smiled to myself, feeling the warmth of the evening, but a strange flutter stirred in my chest. Tonight was a family gathering, one I had been looking forward to, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As I set the table, I caught sight of Walter across the room. He was leaning back in his chair, a glass of red wine cradled in his hands, his laughter infectious. I had always found him charming, but tonight there was an electricity in the air that made my heart race. Walter, Mark's grandfather, with his silver hair and twinkling blue eyes, had a way of making everyone feel special, but there was something more in the way he looked at me, a glimmer that sent shivers down my spine. "Sarah, come join us," Walter called, his voice smooth and inviting. I hesitated, wiping my hands on the dish towel before stepping into the living room. Mark was deep in conversation with his parents, oblivious to the magnetic pull between Walter and me. "Tell us again about the time you danced with that famous actress," I prompted, trying to blend in with the jovial atmosphere. Walter's eyes lit up and he leaned forward, clearly relishing the attention. "Oh, it was a night to remember," he began, his voice low and conspiratorial, drawing me in. "We were at a charity gala, and she swept me onto the dance floor. I thought I was dreaming." The room erupted in laughter, but my focus was solely on him. As he spoke, I found myself entranced by the way his hands moved, the way he smiled, and the way he made every person in the room feel like the only one that mattered. Mark turned to me, a grin on his face. "You'd have loved it, Sarah. Grandpa was quite the dancer back in the day." He ruffled Walter's hair playfully, but I could see a flicker of something in Walter's gaze, an intensity that made my cheeks flush. "Maybe you should show Sarah a step or two, Walter," Mark teased, oblivious to the tension building in the air. "She could use some rhythm." Everyone chuckled, but my heart raced at the thought. I could feel Walter's eyes on me, assessing, challenging, and it made my insides twist. As the evening wore on, the wine flowed freely, and the laughter grew louder. I found myself sitting next to Walter at the table, our knees almost touching. He leaned in closer, and I caught a hint of his cologne, a mix of cedar and something spicy that made my head spin. "Tell me, Sarah," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial, "what do you really think of my grandson?" His question caught me off guard, and I felt my pulse quicken. Did he know? Was there something in my demeanor that gave away my conflicted feelings? Mark was engaged in a heated debate with his father about politics, completely unaware of the charged conversation happening right beside him. I swallowed hard, the guilt creeping in. He's wonderful," I managed to say, but even I could hear the hesitation in my voice. Walter's smile widened, and he chuckled softly. "Wonderful isn't quite the word I'd use, but I appreciate your loyalty." His eyes sparkled with mischief, and I felt a thrill of rebellion course through me. There was something about Walter that made me feel alive, like I was stepping outside the boundaries of my everyday life. The night continued, but as I cleared the table and served dessert, a tumult of emotions swirled within me. Guilt nagged at me for feeling this way about my husband's grandfather. Yet I couldn't deny the thrill that came with each passing glance we shared. I brushed it off as harmless flirting, a fleeting moment of excitement. But deep down, I knew the tension between us was anything but innocent. After the last guest departed, I lingered in the kitchen, the remnants of the evening scattered around me. I felt a mix of exhilaration and guilt wash over me. What had I done? It was just a kiss of flirtation, but as I leaned against the counter, the thrill lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something I had never anticipated. I walked into the local cafe, the smell of freshly brewed coffee swirling in the air, mingling with the sweet scent of pastries. It was a quaint little place, the kind that felt like a hidden gem in the bustling city. I had come here to clear my head, but as soon as I spotted Walter seated in a corner, my heart raced. He looked up and caught my gaze, a warm smile spreading across his face. It was impossible to deny the magnetic pull I felt towards him, a force that seemed to grow stronger with each encounter. "Sarah," he called, waving me over. I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation as I approached. The last time we'd seen each other, things had been charged electric even. I had brushed it off then, but now, sitting across from him, I could feel the tension crackling in the air between us. "Hey, Walter," I said, trying to sound casual. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I could say the same," he replied, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "I was just thinking about our last family dinner. You were the brightest star in the room." The compliment made my cheeks flush, and I couldn't help but smile. "You're just being charming," I replied, though I secretly reveled in the attention. "How have you been?" "Busy with family projects, you know how it is," he said with a shrug, but there was a glint in his eye that suggested he had something more on his mind. "But I've been thinking a lot about you lately." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh, why is that?" "Well, I don't know. Maybe because you're quite captivating," he said, leaning in slightly. The intimacy of the moment made me uncomfortable and exhilarated at once. I feel like there's a connection between us that goes beyond just family gatherings. I shifted in my seat, trying to process his words. "Walter, you know I'm married to Mark. This isn't." "I know," he interrupted gently, his tone softening. "But sometimes things happen that we can't control. Feelings develop unexpectedly. I'm not trying to complicate your life, but I can't help how I feel." His honesty was both refreshing and terrifying. I felt a surge of guilt wash over me, thinking of Mark, who trusted me completely. "Walter, Sarah," he said, taking a breath, "I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now. I just want you to know that I care about you. More than I should, perhaps, but it's the truth." I looked down at my coffee, swirling the liquid absent-mindedly as I tried to gather my thoughts. "This is a lot to take in," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect our connection to feel this strong." "Neither did I," he replied, his gaze steady. "But I can't ignore it. And I don't want you to either. Just think about it. Okay?" I nodded, my mind racing. The cafe was filled with chatter and laughter, but all I could focus on was Walter's intense gaze and the way my heart was racing. The conversation left me breathless, caught in a storm of emotions I had never anticipated. As I walked home later, my heart was heavy with conflict. Mark was waiting for me, his presence a comforting balm against the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my mind. "Hey, how was your day?" he asked, his smile warm and inviting, yet I couldn't shake the unease that settled in my chest. "It was fine," I replied, trying to sound casual, but I could see the flicker of concern in his eyes. "Just the usual stuff." "You seem off," he observed, his brow furrowing slightly. "Is everything okay at work? You know you can talk to me about anything." I hesitated, the weight of Walter's words still fresh in my mind. "It's just a lot of stress, I guess." Mark reached out, placing his hand on my shoulder. "I'm here for you, Sarah. Always." His sincerity made my heart ache. I wanted to confide in him, to tell him about the feelings I was wrestling with, but the fear of hurting him kept me silent. Instead, I forced a smile, hoping to mask the turmoil inside. That evening, while we watched a mindless TV show together, my thoughts drifted back to Walter. The kiss we had shared was still a vivid memory, a secret that wrapped around me like a shroud. I felt trapped between loyalty and desire, the boundaries of my marriage suddenly feeling fragile and uncertain. As I lay in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, the shadows dancing across the room. I couldn't help but wonder what my life would look like if I let go of my fears and explored this connection with Walter. But the thought of betraying Mark sent a fresh wave of guilt coursing through me. I closed my eyes, hoping for clarity, But instead, I found myself spiraling deeper into confusion. As I sat in my favorite cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air, I couldn't shake the weight of the secret I was carrying. Emily, my best friend, was sitting across from me, her brow furrowed in concern as she took a sip of her drink. I had finally decided to confide in her about the kiss with Walter, Mark's grandfather. The memory of that moment felt like a heavy stone sinking in my stomach. "Sarah, you need to end this before it spirals out of control," Emily said, her voice steady but urgent. "You're married, for God's sake." I know, I exclaimed, raking my fingers through my hair in frustration. But it was just a kiss, a moment of weakness. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did. Emily leaned in closer, her eyes searching mine. "But you felt something, didn't you? It wasn't just a random act. You're attracted to him. And that's dangerous territory." I sighed, feeling the familiar tug-of-war in my chest. "He makes me feel alive in a way that I haven't felt in years. Mark is wonderful, but there's a spark missing. With Walter, it's like he sees me, really sees me. Sarah, this isn't just about you feeling good. It's about loyalty. You have to think about Mark and what this could do to your marriage," she urged, her tone softening as she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I don't want to hurt him," I whispered, my heart aching at the thought. "But I can't just ignore what I felt. Then distance yourself from Walter. Make it clear that you're committed to Mark. It's the only way to get your head straight," Emily suggested, her voice firm. I nodded slowly, the idea of cutting off contact with Walter sending a wave of panic through me. I liked him. I really did. But Emily was right. I had to protect my marriage. Later that day, I found myself pacing in our living room, the sunlight streaming through the windows as I waited for Mark to come home. I was filled with a mix of dread and determination. I needed to set boundaries. I couldn't let Walter's charm pull me in any deeper. When Mark finally walked through the door, his face lit up at the sight of me. "Hey, beautiful. How was your day?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me in a warm embrace. "It was good," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just the usual work stuff. How about you?" "Busy as ever, but I'm glad to be home," he said, his eyes sparkling with affection. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "Mark, can we talk about something important?" "Sure. What's up?" he asked, tilting his head slightly, his expression turning serious. "It's about family gatherings, especially when it comes to Walter," I began, feeling the weight of my words pressing down on me. "I think it would be best if I didn't spend time alone with him anymore." Mark's brow furrowed in confusion. "Why? Did something happen?" "No, nothing happened. I just think it's better for us, for our marriage," I rushed to explain. "I don't want to jeopardize what we have." He studied me for a moment, his eyes searching mine. "Are you sure that's all it is? I've noticed you've been a bit distant lately." My heart sank. Had he sensed something? "I'm just stressed with work. I promise," I lied, forcing a smile. "Okay, if that's what you want. I trust you," he said, but I could see the flicker of concern in his eyes. After our conversation, I felt a strange sense of relief, but it was short-lived. The next day, as I was heading to the park for a jog, I spotted Walter sitting on a bench, his gaze fixed on the ground. I felt my stomach twist. "Hey, Sarah," he said, looking up as I approached. His smile was warm, inviting, and it sent a rush of emotions coursing through me. "Walter," I said, trying to maintain a casual tone, "I didn't expect to see you here. I was just enjoying the day." "Mind if I join you?" he asked, standing up. I hesitated, the internal battle raging within me. "Actually, I was just about to head back." "Come on, don't be like that. We need to talk about what happened between us," he insisted, stepping closer. My heart raced as I searched for the right words. "Walter, we can't. I can't. I need to focus on my marriage." "Your marriage? What about your happiness?" he countered, his voice smooth, yet intense. "You can't deny that there's something between us." "I know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. but I can't let it go any further. I love Mark. Walter stepped back, his expression shifting from charming to frustrated. You're just going to pretend like nothing happened? You can't just walk away from this. I felt trapped, caught in the whirlwind of my emotions. I have to try. As I turned to leave, I felt his gaze on me, a mixture of longing and disappointment that echoed my own turmoil. My heart ached with the weight of my decision as I stepped away, knowing that the battle within me was far from over. The evening air felt charged as I approached the secluded park bench, a spot I had secretly chosen for our rendezvous. I could hardly believe I was about to meet Walter again, the man who had ignited a fire within me that I had long thought extinguished. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and dread. What was I doing? I had promised myself I would stay away, yet here I was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. When I saw him sitting there, the moonlight casting a silver glow on his hair, I felt a jolt of electricity course through my veins. Walter looked up and smiled, a smile that made my heart flutter. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice smooth and inviting. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." "I almost didn't," I admitted, taking a seat beside him. The closeness between us created an intoxicating tension, and I could hardly breathe. This isn't right. Right or wrong," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "We can't deny what we feel." His hand brushed against mine, and I felt a warmth radiate from that simple touch, igniting every conflicted emotion swirling within me. "Walter, I can't just forget about Mark," I whispered, though my heart didn't seem to agree. "He's my husband." Walter leaned in closer, the scent of his cologne enveloping me. "And what about your feelings for me? What do they mean? You can't ignore that spark between us. It's real." I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to lean into him, to give in completely. But this is dangerous. It could ruin everything. I felt the weight of my words, a heavy reminder of the stakes involved. "Sometimes taking risks is what leads to the most beautiful outcomes," he replied, moving his hand to cradle my cheek. I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, and my resolve began to crumble. "Let go of the fear, Sarah, just for tonight." Before I knew it, I was leaning in, the distance between us evaporating, and our lips met in a fervent kiss. It was everything I had imagined and more, passionate, desperate, and filled with a longing that had been building since our first encounter. For a moment, I forgot about the consequences. I forgot about Mark. All that mattered was us. But as quickly as the moment ignited, a wave of guilt washed over me, pulling me back to reality. I pulled away, my breath ragged, my heart pounding in my chest. "No, we can't," I stammered, my hands trembling. "Why not?" Walter's voice was low, almost pleading, as though he could sense my internal struggle. "Why deny what's right in front of us?" "Because it's wrong," I exclaimed, standing up abruptly, my mind racing. "I can't do this to Mark. I can't betray him like this." Walter rose too, his expression shifting from desire to confusion. "You're not betraying him if you're unhappy. You deserve to feel alive." "Sarah," I shook my head, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Then why did you come?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "You have to admit there's something between us that's undeniable." "I know," I whispered, my heart aching at the truth of his words. "But it doesn't change the fact that I love Mark." I made a commitment to him. As I turned to leave, Walter reached for my arm, pulling me back gently. "Sarah, please, just think about it. Think about how you feel when you're with me. You can't just ignore this." I looked into his eyes, seeing the desperation and desire reflected back at me. For a moment, it felt as if the world had narrowed down to just the two of us. "I need time," I finally replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to think." With that, I walked away, my heart heavy with the weight of my choices. I had crossed a line I never thought I would, And now I faced the painful reality of what that meant. Back at home, I found Mark in the living room, engrossed in a book, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. As I walked past him, I felt his eyes flicker up, and for a moment, I feared he could see the turmoil etched on my face. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. "Yeah, just tired," I replied quickly, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I could feel his gaze lingering on me, searching for something beneath the surface. "All right, if you need to talk, I'm here," he said, returning to his book. As I retreated to our bedroom, the walls felt like they were closing in on me. I sank onto the bed, trying to process everything that had just happened. My heart ached for Mark, yet the memory of Walter's kiss lingered, a bittersweet reminder of the passion I had tasted. Little did I know, Mark had been noticing changes in me, and soon he would confront me about it. The tension was building, and the truth was ready to unravel, whether I was prepared for it or not. I found myself staring at the blank screen of my phone, my heart racing as I prepared to text Mark. The weight of my secret felt heavier than ever, pressing down on my chest like a boulder. I had never imagined that I would be in this situation, torn between my husband and the alluring charm of his grandfather, Walter. As I took a deep breath, I hit the keys, my fingers trembling. "Mark, can we talk? I need to tell you something important." The seconds felt like hours as I waited for his reply. When it finally came, his response was swift and filled with concern. "Of course, Sarah. What's going on? Are you okay?" I hesitated. Was I okay? I didn't know. I was a mess of conflicting emotions, swirling between guilt and desire. "Can you meet me at our favorite cafe?" I typed back, hoping the familiar setting would ease the tension that was building inside me. When I arrived, I found Mark already seated at a corner table, his brow furrowed in concern. He stood up as I approached, his eyes searching mine. "What's wrong? You look pale." I could feel my heart pounding against my ribcage. I need to tell you something," I stammered, settling into the chair across from him. "I've been feeling confused lately. There's someone else." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Mark's expression shifted, the light in his eyes dimming. "What do you mean, Sarah? Someone else? Is it serious?" "No, it's not serious," I rushed to clarify. "It's just, I've developed feelings for someone. I didn't want to hurt you. I'm so sorry." "Who is it?" he asked, his voice steady, but I could see the hurt creeping into his eyes. "Tell me, please." I swallowed hard, the name of Walter hovering on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. "I can't. I just can't," I whispered, tears threatening to spill over. "I just need you to know that I'm still here. I want to work this out with you." Mark reached across the table, his hand enveloping mine. "Sarah, I love you. You're my world. Please, let's fight for our marriage. We can get through this together." His words were a lifeline, but they also filled me with guilt. I had kissed his grandfather. I had betrayed him in a way that felt unforgivable. "I want to try, Mark. I really do," I replied, squeezing his hand tightly. But in my heart, I knew the battle was far from over. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I tried to focus on repairing my relationship with Mark, but Walter's persistent advances complicated everything. I received a text from him one afternoon that sent my heart racing. "Hey, Sarah, I can't stop thinking about you. We need to talk. I know you're struggling with Mark. Just picture what we could have together." My stomach twisted as I read his words. I had made a decision to stay committed to Mark, yet Walter's allure was intoxicating. I texted him back, my fingers dancing over the screen in frustration. "Walter, please. I can't do this. I'm trying to work things out with my husband." His response was immediate, almost too quick. "You really think that's going to work? You're just lying to yourself. You deserve to be happy, not trapped in a lifeless marriage." The conversation spiraled, each text adding fuel to the fire. I felt torn. Walter's words tugged at something deep within me, awakening desires I thought I could suppress. I wanted to scream at him, to leave me alone. Yet a part of me craved that night as I lay in bed next to Mark. I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I stared at the ceiling, wrestling with my thoughts. What have I done? I muttered to myself, tears rolling down my cheeks. Mark turned towards me, concern etched on his face. Sarah, what's going on? You're so distant lately. Please talk to me. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. How could I confess that I was entangled in this emotional mess, torn between my love for him and the magnetic pull of his grandfather? Instead, I just shook my head. I'm just tired, I lied, wishing I could erase the turmoil within me. As I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had to give. I had to choose a path, but the right choice felt obscured by the fog of my conflicting emotions. Walter's words echoed in my mind, and I knew this battle was far from over. I stood in front of the mirror, my heart a chaotic symphony of dread and determination. I had decided to meet Walter one last time, convinced that I needed to put an end to this whirlwind of chaos that had become my life. As I adjusted my hair, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap of my own making. I took a deep breath, attempting to calm the storm inside me, and stepped out of the house. The cafe was buzzing with the usual afternoon crowd, but my mind was far from the cheerful chatter around me. I spotted Walter seated at our usual table, his charming smile plastered on his face as he waved me over. As I approached, I felt a pang of nostalgia for the moments we shared, but I quickly reminded myself of the reality I was facing. Sarah, I'm glad you came, he said, his voice smooth and inviting. Walter, we need to talk, I replied, trying to keep my tone firm. Talk? Or do you mean to say goodbye? He asked, leaning back in his chair, his eyes sparkling with mischief. I can't keep doing this. I need to be honest with myself and with Mark, I stated, feeling the weight of my words hang heavily between us. Walter leaned forward, an unsettling smile creeping across his face. You think this is about honesty? You're too naive, Sarah. You really don't understand the game we're playing. I felt my stomach drop. What do you mean? He chuckled, a dark undertone lurking beneath his laughter. You think I've been after you because of some infatuation? No, my dear. This is much deeper than that. This is about family, about revenge. My heart raced as confusion and betrayal swirled within me. Revenge? What are you talking about? Mark and I have had our differences, you see. Family feuds run deep. And I've simply been using this little affair of ours to get back at him for things you couldn't possibly understand. He revealed, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, the weight of his words pressing down like a heavy stone. You've been manipulating me? Manipulating? No, I've just been playing the cards I was dealt. And you, Sarah, were a perfect pawn, he said, leaning back with a self-satisfied grin. I stood up abruptly, my hands trembling. I can't believe this. I thought you cared about me. Walter shrugged, his expression devoid of remorse. Caring is for the weak. You're smart, but you've let your emotions cloud your judgment. I had you wrapped around my finger, and it was almost too easy. With my heart pounding, I turned on my heels and rushed out of the cafe, the reality of what I had just learned crashing down on me. I needed to get home. I needed to confront Mark. When I burst through the front door, Mark looked up from the couch, concern etched on his face. Sarah, what's wrong? Walter, he's been using me, Mark. It's all a game to him. I blurted out, my voice shaking with emotion. Mark's expression hardened. I knew something was off. I've been keeping an eye on him. I wanted to protect you, but I didn't know how to approach it. I was taken aback by his words. You knew? Not everything, but I had my suspicions. I started digging into Walter's past, and it confirmed my worst fears. He's been looking for a way to hurt me, Mark revealed, his jaw clenched in anger. We can't let him get away with this. We need to expose him, I said, a newfound resolve igniting within me. Together, Mark replied, taking my hands in his. We'll show him that family loyalty means something. As we strategized, I felt the weight of my guilt beginning to lift. The betrayal from Walter only solidified my love for Mark, and I knew we would emerge from this stronger. At the family gathering later that week, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. I could see Walter mingling with the family, his charm still intact, but I was no longer entranced by it. Mark and I exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between us. It was time to reveal the truth. Walter, Mark announced, his voice cutting through the chatter. We need to talk about your intentions. Everyone turned to face us, surprise etched on their faces as Walter's smile faltered. What are you talking about, Mark? I know what you've been doing, using Sarah to get back at me. It's time everyone knows the truth, Mark declared, his voice steady and unwavering. The room fell silent, tension crackling in the air as Walter's facade crumbled. I stood beside Mark, feeling a surge of pride in his bravery. You're nothing but a coward, Walter, I spat, anger flooding my veins. You've played with the feelings of those who cared for you. The truth hung heavy in the air, and as the family processed the revelation, I could see Walter's shame morphing into anger. Get out, Mark said, his voice low and menacing. With that, Walter was left isolated, the price of his betrayal now clear. As the family rallied around us, I felt a sense of unity and strength that I hadn't realized we had. Mark and I emerged hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next, our love fortified by the chaos that had tried to tear us apart.